You're listening to Story Now. Today's guest is Janey Stahl.
A little gratitude will make your garden grow. A little gratitude is good for your soul.
You're listening to the Story Now podcast, and with me, as always, is our producer, James Roth. James?
Hello, hello.
So you were sick for a while, and I tried to record an intro. I don't know if you saw that in the previous files.
No.
It's there.
Oh.
It was real sad. I was I was like, and with me as always is, oh, he's not here. And then I just cried. So
You just sobbed into the microphone.
Yeah.
If you listen closely, you can hear the tear roll down the side.
I know, yeah, exactly. So you're feeling better. So you're back.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
for
that's
sure.
good. It wasn't was it the Rona?
It was not the Rona.
Okay. That's good.
It is unknown, but it is not the Rona.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm glad I can be here to say yes and hello and all my other witty banter that I provide.
Yeah, well, and I also love your perspective, because I don't know if people, because I've talked to a couple people that have listened to the podcast, and they've said, we love how you and James talk about what stuck out to you, because then we know what to listen to.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, yes, it's because I own a business, and James at some point wants to own a business.
Right.
So the things that stick out in the conversation are different.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, oh, so that's why you do it. And I think we talk about it in one of the first episodes.
Right.
And so I don't know if, anyways, if you were curious, that's why we do that, is because, we talk about this all the time about perspective and how different things stick out to different people and whatever stage of life they're in.
Yeah. This is basically the Spark Notes, but before you listen to the...
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, today we are speaking with a good friend of ours, Janey Stahl. Janey is a fractional CFO. And James, what were some of the things that you enjoyed about the conversation?
Yeah, so you had a conversation with her about kind of the social networks that you build as business owners, and how those social networks are really useful for asking questions and getting feedback on different ideas you have for the business or different directions you could go in. And I think there was just a lot of value in that conversation. I really enjoyed listening to that part.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite things about the conversation was just hearing about her humble approach in helping businesses, but then also tracking the data and tracking the growth and putting real numbers behind the approach of everything. I just thought that was so cool, because I mean, I don't know what I thought about a CFO.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I might have had like a preconceived idea of what that would look like.
Right.
But when she says, I present all of the data, and then ultimately it's the business owner's decision, like which direction to go in.
Right.
I just thought that it was always like, it's my way or the highway,
right.
That kind of approach. And so just hearing about how she's narrowed down her focus and really doing what she loves, but also staying very humble about it. I really appreciated her openness and willingness to share that side of her business.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, without further ado, here is our conversation with Janey Stahl. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us today, Janey. So you are a fractional CFO. So I'm curious, can you explain that to us and how the evolution of your journey has sort of gone?
Yeah, well, thank you, Jonathan, for having me. So a fractional CFO, there are a lot of different terms for this, but a fractional CFO is just a part-time CFO. A virtual CFO is someone who is online or can do it from anywhere. So you don't have to have someone in your office doing that. And so it seems like that role has kind of merged together in this industry. And so I am both. I serve clients across the United States, so I don't have to be local. I can do anything for their business, as long as they have online systems. But then I'm also doing it on a part-time basis. So a lot of these small businesses that I serve, they get to a point where the business owner can no longer do everything themselves, and they may not have expertise in finance, or they don't want to do that every day. And so they're looking to outsource the financial functions of their business, but they need to be able to do it in an affordable way. So there seems to be this threshold where businesses are growing. They need a little bit more help in their financial area, but they want to be able to hire somebody within an affordable budget. So that's where I come in.
That's pretty cool. And I would imagine that going this route for a small business, especially, would be the biggest bang for their buck. Just because then they're not hiring a full-time person. They're only paying for what they need. So that's pretty amazing by itself. But then also, how did you see your business shift with COVID-19 and all of a sudden just everybody's working from home? Did you see like a surge in that, or how did that affect, the businesses that you work with?
Yeah, so I did notice an impact, especially on small businesses with COVID-19. So I started my business prior to COVID-19. And so I was already working with people out of state, and everything that we were doing was already online. I found that with COVID-19, people had to get even more budget friendly, and they had to, scale down a little bit and get more lean. And so there was that shift. And then also, like you said, a lot of people were working from home. And so, I used to work for a corporation where they were very resistant to letting people work from home. And so I thought it was interesting to see that all of these businesses and all of these different jobs or industries that we did not think could be done online previously, you found a way to do it. So I welcomed that change. I think it's good from my perspective. You are able to find efficiencies when you're able to let somebody work from home who no longer has to drive 2 hours. They can actually get more work done within that time frame. So I thought it brought about a lot of positive changes, and it certainly supported my business model.
Yeah. Yeah. And it gives you more time to be with your family. Yeah. I mean, you can't argue with that right there. So,
yeah.
So do you see more businesses implementing these kinds of services? Because recently I met somebody who had a similar model, but it was with HR. So is that kind of the future of businesses, is sort of hiring out these specific services rather than having them in-house?
Yeah, I think it depends on the business and on the industry. If there is and it's all dependent on the business's appetite for that. So, even you can see different trends towards outsourcing. So again, that corporation that I mentioned that I used to work at, we went through major rollouts of outsourcing entire departments to different countries. And so there's that end of the spectrum where we're seeing a lot of major, like Rockwell Collins and a lot of these big corporations in the United States have already been going down that path for the last 2 decades.
Okay, interesting.
So there's one end of the outsourcing spectrum. And then you have this other dynamic of the online outsourcing. So maybe you don't need to technically outsource it to a different country, but maybe you have some people who are, I would say, local, quote unquote, in the United States, but they are online. And so if you think about when you go to hire somebody, if you're only looking at the Iowa City, Iowa area for your pool of candidates, maybe you get 50 applicants who are qualified. But if you can look at the entire United States, whether it's an accountant or an HR specialist, whatever role you're trying to fill, you have a much larger pool to choose from when you do give that option of having someone be virtual or be able to work from home.
Mm-hmm. So when somebody contacts you and sort of starts, asking questions about the business and things you can offer, can you walk me through the process of what onboarding looks like and how, and maybe you could talk a little bit about this, because I know that this is something that we go through with clients, is just making sure that they're a right fit.
As business owners, you continue to narrow that down and fine tune it even more and more. The more people you work with and identify, what are characteristics that are a good fit and what is not. So to start, my process is usually most people are coming to me from word of mouth. So they've already heard about me, which is very helpful.
Yeah.
We've kind of already gone halfway across the bridge. And so usually they'll reach out to me. I have an intake form where it's almost similar to if you were to work with a financial advisor. They kind of want to know just where are you at right now? Where is point A for you? I'll ask them, what are your goals for your business? So this is where I try to make the work that I'm doing and the analysis and the plan very custom to their situation. So for one business, maybe they do not want to be the CEO anymore. Maybe they want to take a step back in their business and they're trying to figure out how they get from right now, they're doing everything, to them shifting more into a role of a director type role, a board of directors. So that might be one person's goal, but another business's goal might be that they're really in a building year and they're just trying to increase profit margins. And so they're trying to make smart decisions, determining whether to expand, where they should be spending their money, what's going to give them the biggest return on their investment. And so based on that intake form and our initial conversation, we will start from there and I will give them a plan of okay, I think these are the things that I could help you with. And this is what that plan looks like. We will do step 1, step 2, step 3. This is how long it's going to take. So the process in a nutshell is first discovery. So we're trying to discover where is point A and where is point B. Step 2 is make a plan for how are we going to get there. And I think that's key because we all know that we should be eating healthy. We all know that we should be working out. What's hard is actually doing it and setting up a system or a process to make sure that you are going to execute. So I really pride myself and I really try to show up in that area to make sure that the things that we say we're going to do, we are going to hit these goals. And this is how fast we're going to do it.
Yeah.
And then step 3 is just reflecting on that. So we're making sure that we have certain systems set up so that we can measure leads, that we can measure employee turnover. We want to make sure that we're capturing all of the data so that we can see, are we making progress or not?
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. Well, and just even the power of having somebody hold you accountable is a game changer. So that's pretty cool. So
I think I answered part of your question, but I don't know if you have.
Yeah, well, I'm just curious. What are some of the success stories? Because, and I don't know if you're allowed to talk about those or not, but I would love to hear about. I'm always amazed because especially you are very organized and goal driven, and so I always love hearing the story because I'm an artistic person, so I'm not your style, and so. I always love it when I hearing stories about when somebody that's organized, goal-driven comes in and sort of changes the way a business functions for the better. Because that's, my wife is a CPA. She's very similar in that regard. And so I always love a good success story. So.
Well, first I want to say, I mean, you have a humble heart. That's a good thing. I think it's pretty common first I'll say I'm always surprised that what to the outside, to me, when a prospect comes to me, from the outside, like they're very successful. They have a very successful business. And I'm always blown away that every single business owner I meet has some insecurity. And so oftentimes it's like something like what you just said, like, I'm just not good at this area, or I didn't go to college for finance. And so that's always interesting to me. And I think that in order for, so we actually, like, data shows that businesses go through this, like an S curve, if you think about a chart of the growth of your business, where, at first, like, yeah, you're bringing in sales, you're profitable, things are going well. Well, at a certain point, you can no longer do everything. And if you are doing everything, then that's where, if you think of like an S, you kind of start to dip in terms of sales and profitability because your business suffers.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't think that none of us have every single like strength or excel in every single area. And so I do think we need to find either employees or, consultants or partners to collaborate with that can fill in for those gaps, if you will, or maybe just those weaknesses that you might have. And so I always like to say, like, this is your business. Like, at the end of the day, you call the shots. I'm just providing the data to support your decision so that you feel confident with that. So I just wanted to start with that.
Yeah.
But the success stories, I can keep it generic. So I try to keep track of the data in terms of results. And so for most of my clients, they doubled their revenue within 12 months.
Oh, wow.
I would like to see their profit margin also increase. So, like, it's not just revenue, right? Because you can have a billionaire who's really, brings in a lot of sales, but if they're living outside their means and constantly spending more than what they're earning, it doesn't really matter.
Mm-hmm.
So I would like to see net income and see that profit margin increase. Sometimes that also increases, and that's my goal. But other times we might just be in a building year where it might be a year of like, oh, we're expanding our team or we doubled our team. So it's great that revenue increased, but this was a building year. And so we didn't see our profit margin increase as much as we wanted to, but we just know that those were good investments. And we're trying to set up the metrics to be able to measure, like, okay, well then 1 year or 2 years from now, like, what do we need to see for profitability to be able to determine whether that was a smart decision and whether that really made us money.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be one like key. I really do try to focus on profitability. I think that's what speaks to most business owners. Is they're like, make me more money.
Right.
But the other element that people don't normally articulate right away, but I think they appreciate is, for a lot of businesses, like, entrepreneurs are really hard workers, and most of them are working 60, 80-hour weeks. And at a certain point, you're going to get burned out. And so sometimes I'll see there's not as much passion there, or they just feel like, I think you have to constantly weigh, like, what are your core values and what are the priorities in your life? So if it comes down to it, is it your family or is it the business?
Mm-hmm.
And so we also try to make it scalable, but also align to their ideal lifestyle. So if you're currently working 80 hours a week, would you like to only work 40 hours a week? Okay, let's try to figure out how we can make that achievable. And so I have had 2 clients who they were doing all the things at first. And then over the course of a year or 2, we were able to create a board of directors for their business. They were able to hire either a director of operations or a CEO who would like run the day-to-day. And then that allowed them to, like, one of them started a completely separate business. It was kind of more of their, just like their passion project. So I feel like that is probably a major, like, that success to them was probably more important to them.
Yeah. Do you find that it's a challenge to, because I know, so we hired our first employee this year, and I noticed that there are certain things that I just didn't want to let go of, but I knew from a time deadline perspective that I couldn't or I needed to. And so when I would turn projects over, I found that it was actually a better result. Is it hard to convince business owners? Because I mean, when you start a business, it's kind of your baby. And I think especially if you started off by yourself, the more it grows, I find it a challenge, I guess I would say, to let certain things go. How do you work with people that are like this? I want to work 40 hours a week. I don't want to work 80, but I don't want to let go of XYZ, which is still going to be 8 hours a week. How do those conversations look?
So I've been fortunate where a lot of the business owners I'm working with, they already have a team in place, but it just might be that team is still helping with more of the tactical things and not really taking things off of the CEO's plate. And so it is challenging because in order to really get things off the CEO's plate, those are usually, I'm trying to remember if this was a Lencioni or I can't remember, but someone claimed that most businesses will not get past 3 employees because at a certain point, you can outsource and delegate all of the tasks, but what's really hard to delegate is the decisions. And so that's where usually CEOs are like, this is still my business. And the crux is, I think that they have seen how it helps to have a team. And so they already have that buy-in, but they're struggling with the reality is like, if you really are going to get a good director of operations or a good CEO who you can fully trust to just offload like an entire department to you, that costs money. So that's usually the hesitation or the challenge that we have, is trying to find really good talent that we can fully trust to just say like, here you go, you're in charge of this, to be able to find that key person who still, again, fits within the budget that we can afford. That's the challenge usually.
So to kind of not totally change gears, but, obviously you've worked with a lot of businesses. What are some of the lessons that you've learned on your entrepreneur journey is there anything that surprised you? Anything that, if you could go back and redo, you would go back and redo?
I would say I'm going to take this in a slightly different direction, because in terms of like what I think are more broad lessons that apply to most leaders or most business owners, I think one of the key things I've learned, and I try to remind my clients, is, like I alluded to earlier, it doesn't matter who you are, almost everyone has a little bit of insecurity in like some area. And something that I've reminded my clients is, a lot of business owners will be like, they'll focus on their weakness. Like I'm really good at influencing my team and like getting my team to buy in on an idea. And I'm able to like get people to adapt and change quickly, but I'm not very analytical, or I'm not very strategic. Like I can't really sit down and figure out what is the plan? How are we going to move to that next step? And so oftentimes business owners have this idea of like, oh, in order to be a good CEO or to be a good leader, I have to be really charismatic. And I think our society has definitely placed an emphasis on you have to be really outgoing and bubbly and charismatic. And I have found for myself, and then some of my clients, kind of have this same personality of like, maybe they're a little bit more of the quiet and reserved personality type. And so I think one of the lessons has been, rather than like focusing on your weakness and what you're not, I think you are not going to be, and this is totally a mutual friend, Erica Olaf. This goes to like the Gallup Strengths Finder, but this idea of if you're trying to show up and be somebody that you're not, then you're not going to be successful. You're not going to be a good CEO. But if you can embrace and stay true to your style, like rather than going in front of the all staff meeting and trying to be influential when you're not, if you're really good at laying out the plan or laying out the statistics, then stick to that.
Yeah.
People are going to be able to see through, when you are not being genuine or true to like just your true self.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good. In the course of your journey, what surprised you?
Something that has surprised me. So for my own personal journey, I feel like I talk about this a lot, but I'll just keep it brief. I, went from the corporate life and being the breadwinner and the insurance carrier. We had a baby. And then I left that comfort to join a startup. And that gave me courage, that seeing another startup build their business, that gave me courage that I could do the same thing. And so through my journey, I was laid off, found out I was pregnant with baby number 2 on the same day. And, everybody's journey has looked different, right? Like not all of us were pushed off the cliff to go start our business. But I think it's interesting that whoever the entrepreneur is, whoever the business owner is, everybody's gone through something. Like somebody has gone through a challenge.
Yeah.
And so I'm along the lines of like staying true to who you are. I think I've learned and I've appreciated and I respect when someone can own their story and rather than like run from that or make excuses for it, they just own it as part of who they are. And they look at like, that happened for me, not to me. And I had a lot of, there was meaning in the struggle. Like there was a purpose behind the struggle. So I guess that's my like big conclusion of that.
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing that story. I kind of went through something a little similar in terms of we started Storyline, not because we thought, hey, let's do this. I mean, we knew it had potential, but I was working at the University of Iowa and I quit to take a part-time job that just wasn't a good fit. And so that was only 4 months, I think. And so, my wife and I, we had a discussion. If we're ever going to try this, we're going to try it now. And the timing of everything didn't make sense because we had just had our little girl. And so, if anything, looking back, I wouldn't change anything, even though, I could have probably stayed at the University of Iowa forever in the corporate world, doing training videos and things like that. So, what would you say to somebody that's, dreaming about having their own business, chasing their dreams? What would you say to them? Because I feel like I wouldn't have been, I feel like I'm living out my dream now, but circumstance sort of pushed me there, And so I'm curious to get your thoughts on what you would say to somebody that's thinking about making that leap into becoming an entrepreneur and starting their own business.
So for me, like faith is a big thing. I've always felt like I tend to get caught up in like the day-to-day, like little things, but I know that like in the major blessings of like health and family and, just like having prosperity, I've never really been one to worry that much about those things. I like had this gut feeling that God would take care of us. And not to say like, I am a very practical person. I'm not someone who's like, well, I don't need to work, like this is just going to work out.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that at all, but, it's funny because I've been asked the question, like, do you think you were pushed off a cliff? And I'm like, I don't think so. Like, I think you just have different work experiences and it's kind of like the breadcrumbs path of like, I just met the right people at the right time and had different experiences that all led to the point where I'm at right now. So I say that to me, it was a lot of comfort to know that what's the worst that's going to happen?
Sure.
I had a good degree. I have my master's degree. I'm like, if, this business did not work, I could go get a job. And now we've seen, especially with the last year with the job market, I'm like, you can get a job like that anywhere. So I guess it would be like, if faith is important to you and you feel like that's something you can fall back on, like really remind yourself of that things are probably going to work out. They may not go, and they're not going to go according to your plan. I did not plan on having another baby right at that point.
Sure.
But it's going to work for you. And in the end, it is going to make you better, make you stronger, make you wiser. So have faith. And then also just think about what's the worst that's going to happen here?
Yeah.
I don't know. Entrepreneurship is not for everyone. And so I feel like you either have a slight interest in it or you're not interested in it at all. So I feel like that's pretty telling in itself. Like if you're interested in it in the slightest, then look at, and usually most people have an idea of what they want to do, but sometimes I have those conversations of where do I even start? And I would say, I think there is a name for this triage, but you look at what you're passionate about. And I know Adam Grant talks a lot about this too. Look back at your childhood and over the years, what do you find yourself always wanting to read about or always wanting to talk about? What lights you up? And then look at what skills do you have? So based on your past experiences, what are some unique skills that you have that other people don't? And then can you monetize that? So if you put those two things together, how could you monetize that?
Yeah. So, and a big thing too, is just surrounding yourself with people who are going to be a good support too. I would say,
yes, absolutely.
People that you can bounce ideas off, and, people who can say that's not a good idea, because I've found too that even when if I pitch an idea and somebody says that's a really bad idea, it's also great because I either go, yes, that is, or I have to argue why it is a good idea. And so having that support system is really good too. And that's so fun that you provide that service to businesses who need that soundboard.
Yeah. Can I ask you where have you found that? Where have you found a good community?
I would say, the reason that we met was through Jordan Montgomery, and there's a social business kind of network there. And there's a big text group. And, I know we haven't used that in a little bit, but that was really helpful for me because I think, one of the things that was interesting was you always hear when you start a business, oh, it's all word of mouth. And I thought, no, in an age of social media and all of that, it was, no, it is actually word of mouth. I kind of felt silly. I'm like, oh, that was true, but a lot of support comes from the customers that we work with. So if we're setting up a video shoot for, with Jordan, for example, there's a little bit of downtime where we're setting up, and I can ask him, hey, I had this happen with a client, and I'm just curious what your perspective is on that. And he usually has really good insight. The other one is, my wife she's the finance master. She's a CPA. She's very goal oriented. So she lays down the hammer in a good way of, because I think that's part of the I think maybe one of the biggest struggles about owning a media type business is you always want the next biggest, piece of equipment that is way too expensive. And so having somebody on your team that goes, that doesn't make any sense. Are your clients really going to be able to tell the difference between a $2,000 camera and a $10,000 camera? And so kind of finding the people that are like, yeah, that's a great idea, but does it make sense for this time of year or where you're at? So, I would just say just the network that, we're in, and that's what's so fun about, and honestly, like, that's why we even started the podcast, is because we meet all these great people like yourself who's got great insight, but it feels like it's kind of a rip off for people if that's just a conversation between, if other people aren't exposed to it. Cause I know there's a lot of people out there that are, praying about their next step of, I'm really passionate about this, but I also have a family to support. So I'm not sure if this is going to work. And I just think that there's such great insight from the people that you meet, and everybody's got a story. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I like what you said about that it's kind of a ripoff if it's just a conversation between two people and other people don't have access to that. Because I've been curious about, like, so there's so many stats on, like, female entrepreneurs in particular don't have access to mentors in the same numbers that men do. And I've been curious about that because I'm like, I don't know if that's true for every area. Maybe it depends on the area, like geographically. Maybe it depends on the industry. I definitely felt like that was true in the corporate environment. Right. And it gets to that element of, like, for me, there was frustration that it was like, why is my male manager taking my male colleague to dinner and giving him, like, pouring into him and giving him so much advice and insight and wisdom to, like, help him grow his career. And I have found that I feel like actually in entrepreneurship, just over the last few years, like, it's kind of turned in the opposite direction, where we have a lot of female entrepreneurs that will only work with and will only coach other female entrepreneurs, which to me, I feel like we all get better together. Yeah. Like, but yeah, so I do agree that it's hard to find mentors regardless, like whether you're male or female. And so if you can find someone, and that's a really good point of, like, sometimes I think it has to be super formal. Yeah. And it's just like, no, like, if you know somebody and you're just in the same space as them, like, just ask them a question. So
yeah. And it's sort of goes back to what you were saying earlier, is like, we can ask for advice, but the challenge is coming up with a plan and putting that into place. Right. So that's what we love about, working with some of our clients that, are on a regular basis, is it's just very conversational. Hey, what'd you do with this piece of advice I gave you? Well, hopefully I have a good answer, but it's, it's very interesting because, I feel very lucky because I feel like I've have a friendship with, most of our regular clients, where it is very, very much, open book. Hey, what do you think? And so, which has been great, because there's been things that we've had to deal with, I wasn't aware of, that everybody's not going to be a good fit. I was like, well, I think I can get everybody to like me, and, and, just everybody's got different styles. There's some projects where we work on where the person wants to be over our shoulder. And then there's other projects where, they just want it really done well. So, and they don't really need to be a part of the process at all. So it's kind of that was just interesting to navigate,
Have you, I feel like I don't know. So I think first, it depends on the business owner. Like, maybe you do not, if you've identified that you don't want somebody who's over your shoulder, you could go that route to like try to, filter out the different personality types, I guess, or working styles.
Yeah.
I think maybe I'm more of I'm more of like a values, like, is there mutual respect here? Are you, like, do I feel like, can I help you? And so to answer, like, can I help you? there's probably a few questions of like, were you even willing to go through the process of having this initial conversation? Like I try to pick up on those cues of, okay, were they showing up? Did they answer the questions that I asked them to answer? But in terms of, I try to meet people where they're at in terms of personality. So it's like if someone, and I try to ask up front, like, do you want to have text messages or do you want me to check in via email? Like how can I help you stay accountable and try to match to their personality style? Have you found a way to gauge that?
Yeah, well, I think it's an evolution for sure. When you start off your business, you say yes to everything because you want it to succeed. And then it finally gets to the point where if you say yes to everything, it's going to destroy your business. So it's interesting to me to see the contrast because you really need the work in the beginning. And then when you start to focus it in, and so when you start to say no to things, I think that's when you really start to grow. And anyways,
I think I'm pretty good about setting the expectations. So like, I really try to be upfront about like, this is how long it's going to take. This is the price point. And I really try hard to stick to that. And then I even set, like, I have a welcome packet where I'm like, texts are or are not allowed and my office hours are these times. So I've done a good job at that, but I just said to my husband yesterday, I'm like, I think I need to improve on my like follow through game, both in parenting and in with clients. Cause like you said, I don't know. I feel like this is relevant for all relationships, all interpersonal relationships, like just being willing to not have that assumption of like, oh my gosh, this should be a no brainer to them. Like, why do they think it's okay to text me at odd times of the night? But unless you are willing to have a candid conversation with them and just say like, hey, this is not what I expected. We are going over budget.
Sure.
I think I need to improve in that area is having the continuous follow up when things are starting to derive from our expectations and clearly outline like your unsaid assumptions or expectations rather than just like making assumptions and assuming, oh, well, they're just not a good client or they're a jerk, so I don't want to work with them.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and it's all about perspective too. Cause when we first started, I found that pretty much if the client was 40 or under, that they had no problem texting really late at night. So we would get these texts at like, I would wake up at like 12:30, read this text. And I'm like, do they expect me to do this now? But I was so new to it that I'm like, well, I guess I'm going to do it. So I get up and, work on this project for 45 minutes or whatever, and then go back to sleep. And later we had that conversation and I realized that it seems like for a lot of younger people, texting is the new email. So they said, oh, well, no, we didn't mean to have you work on this right away. We were just thinking about it. So we wanted to send you a note like you would an email, but there are certain people that text like they should email. So that was just a learning curve of like, oh, you weren't trying to demand something of me late at night. We just had different definitions of what a text meant, I think.
Yeah.
So you stand out to me as a person in the community that's making a huge impact. What are some of the ways that you give back to the community?
So I feel insecure in this area, actually.
Okay.
I'm Enneagram 1, so I'm a perfectionist. Like, everything could always be better. I could always grow and improve.
Sure.
And so for us, like we have 2 young kids right now in this season. And so we do donate, to certain causes that we're passionate about. We do a lot with our church, and so if there's a community fundraiser or, family that's in need or, with Christmas, with gifts and those things, we try to help as much as we can. Where I feel insecure is I am usually like that person that takes on like the leadership role, or spearheads something. And so I have not got super involved in leading a campaign or spearheading anything. And so I sometimes can feel like, I need to be doing more, especially for me, I'm a business owner. I want to be able to give back to others. And I've had to give myself grace that it's like, you have 2 young kids right now, especially with them being sick every week. It's like, we're in survival mode right now. So I've just learned that there will be hopefully a season for that where you will have a little bit slower pace of life and you can really contribute more and be personally involved in a specific, community effort. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah, no, I feel like that's where I'm at as well. So you're in good company. One of the things that you just mentioned, your that you're a perfectionist. I'm curious, how is your social media going? Because you have great posts, but I'm at the point where I feel like I'm trying to make every post so perfect that I don't ever post. So I'm curious, as a perfectionist, how do you make the social media hurdle?
I am not good. So I'm the opposite of creative. I'm not good with the graphics, and I have done it myself. I've had a virtual assistant help me sometimes, but for the most part, it's not like I completely outsource that to like a graphic designer, a social media manager. So surprisingly, in that element, I'm just like, whatever, good enough.
Yeah. Well, because you said all your business is word of mouth. So do you find that it's word of mouth and then people go to your social media as more of like a portfolio or just to kind of make sure that, the business is legit? Because I that's what we've found is that, we don't have a huge following, but, people will hear about us word of mouth and then they'll check out our website and our social media and they go, okay, we really like this.
Yeah, I do.
Do
I
you
agree
find
with
the same
you.
thing?
And that has evolved for me over time. I think at first I tried to post at least twice a week, like my first year of business, just to build up some content and like build that credibility of if someone goes to my social media or my blogs, they can see that I've been talking about this stuff for a while. And so in the more content you're putting out there, it just gives people, again, like that credibility of like, oh, she's talking about a variety of different things. And so she's knowledgeable about that body of content. But now I would say last year, up until this point, I have had a revelation lately that my demographics have kind of changed. So at first I was working with like the really small businesses, like almost solopreneurs or like 1 to 3 man or woman shops. And so there's a lot of those businesses on Instagram. And so at first, like it made sense, how much time I was spending on social media. But now at this point, I'm working with like $5 to $10 million businesses. And so a lot of those people, they're too busy and they may have social media, but they're probably not on it as often. And it's just the type of content that they're looking for. And like the problems that I need to solve for them are different. And so I realized that I'm like, I don't know that it's really worth it to put out 2 social media posts every week to target that audience. So I have scaled back on that. And I agree with you that it's word of mouth primarily, but then I do think that the website and the social media, because that's what I also look at, is if I get like a prospect that sends me their name and they don't have a website or social media, like just with so many scams that are going on, you're kind of like, are you a real person?
Yeah. Yep. Well, I know that we're kind of bumping up on our hour here. So my last question, and I had the privilege of listening to a podcast that you did with Gary Bontrager, actually recorded that. But one of the things that you mentioned in that podcast was that one of your goals is to retire early. So my question to you is, how does that what does the next 5 years look like? And how does that tie into your personal life?
Yeah. So I will incorporate my husband in this. And because I do this with my clients too. Like sometimes we silo our business from our personal life. And I like to look at your net worth altogether, like all of your assets between the business and your personal life. So I think that we are like set up backwards. I remember when I was in the corporate world, a senior person who was actually retiring was like, "You're working way too hard." He said, "You don't know, like you're living like you're going to live till you're 50 and you may not." And that was a wake up call for me. So I was just like, well, I'll work hard now and then I can retire. And he's like, "No, then you're going to be 80. And do you think you're really going to want to go to Europe when you're 80? Since then, I've kind of changed my approach to this, where I want to try to have as much financial freedom and passive income as possible. Like the younger, the better. So for us, I mean, we are, we're living in Iowa. We're not, living high off the hog by any means. And we've got young children. And so another thing too, that I've had to identify is like, I think we get caught up in the materialistic things of like, well, I want to build a new home, or it would be nice to have a vacation home, or someday to have a boat. And my husband, Jake, and I had to sit down and think through like, what are the things that actually bring us joy? And it's not the materialistic things. So we tried to bump up like our aspiration, okay, if we build up our net worth, like, what are we going to use that towards? Like, why? Like, what is the meaning behind that? We bumped that up to our joy list. And so for us, it was like spending time with our family brings us joy. Being outside brings us joy. So we tried to figure out, okay, if we were to be able to scale back and if he didn't have to work full time and we could still pay our bills and still have some left over, what would be the things on our joy list that maybe we would like to pursue? Like he's not big into traveling, but for me, I'm like, well, we like to be outside. Maybe we could go to Colorado and take the kids. So long story short, I guess my answer would be that for me in 5 years, it's not being involved in the day-to-day in my business. And so also building my team to be able to do that. And then also with the business and personally trying to set ourselves up where we're not dependent on either of our jobs, working 40 hours a week in order to pay our bills. So yeah, but I know that's very generic.
No, that's fantastic. I think, one of the things that's been sort of rocking our world is we do a lot of video content for a wealth management firm. And one of the things that they said that really stuck out to me was most people die on the way down from Mount Everest, not the climb up. And so they kind of compared that to retirement of you work your whole life with wanting to do all of this stuff, at the end. And then when you retire and you're a certain age, you only have it for a couple years.
I know.
So anyways.
Yeah. Not that we're ending on a
tomorrow's not guaranteed.
note.
So you want to, no. This is good. Well, it's just prioritizing, right? You want to invest in memories, I guess is what I'm saying. Yeah. I almost took it down a dark path there.
I think it's good. It was inspirational for me. So
yeah, for sure. So anyways, so how can people find you?
So my website is janeystahl.com, and that's my social media handles as well. I do have a free assessment that might be helpful for people that's on my website. And so it's just an assessment to determine, I think you need performance in all of the key areas of your business in order to be successful or to be profitable. So that can kind of give you like a benchmark of maybe some things that you could try to hit within your business. So again, that's on my website.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for joining us today. And I can't wait to have another conversation with you in the future.
Thank you, John. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Story Now podcast. Before we go, we just wanted to give a special thanks to Justin Goodchild, who wrote and performed the song that you are hearing now.
And please be sure to follow us on all our social media channels, and we'll see you in the next episode.
When you hunger in the tooth, you take your mind off one small truth. No matter what you got, it's never gonna make you whole. Sunday morning, take your rest. Think of all that you've been blessed with. Appreciation will